It's Lions Day. Finally. It's been a while since we've talked about the Lions on this channel. I mean, we talk about it on the podcast channel all the time. Bootleg Football Podcast, shameless plug. We talk about them endlessly on the podcast, but we haven't talked about them over here. And so today we're going to have a mock offseason for the Detroit Lions, going from free agency and cap management all the way through the draft in terms of how I would approach the draft. And we're going to try to turn a playoff contender into a Super Bowl contender in one offseason. Once again, thank you to Underdog for providing copious amounts of tequila and this set and really this whole house here in Phoenix the week of the Super Bowl for me to do all this in. Endless content has been filmed here, and pretty much all of it's coming up here on this channel in the next 2 months. So buckle up. It's a lot. But anyway, let's get to it. Since this episode is coming out after the bulk of free agency is already done, this section is mostly just recapping what the Lions did in free agency, as well as some moves they used to open up cap space, as well as some players that they let go in free agency, which then created a couple of extra holes we're going to have to fill in the draft. But mainly the purpose here is to show you how we got to the depth chart that we're at today, so that you better understand some of the moves that I'm about to do in the draft. First things first, in terms of salary cap management, they did release Michael Brockers and then have Romeo Okwara take a pretty hefty pay cut, which saved them about $9 million for Okwara and $10 million for Brockers, so about $19 million in total savings just between those two moves. And then using that money, in addition to their existing cap space, they signed a whole slew of players, especially leaning on the secondary because they were trying to improve their secondary. They brought in Cameron Sutton on a 3-year deal. Emmanuel Mosley they brought in on a 1-year deal. Mac McCain also signed a 1-year deal. They brought in David Montgomery on a 3-year, $18 million deal, which was less money than I thought Montgomery was going to get, so still a pretty solid signing there. They also brought in Graham Glasgow on a 1-year deal, and surprisingly, CJ Gardner-Johnson also on just a 1-year, $8 million deal. I assume it's just a mercenary contract so that he can ball out in 2023 and then go get a pretty big deal in 2024, but either way, that's to the Lions' benefit. In terms of their own in-house free agents that they retained, Nate Sudfeld was brought back, Craig Reynolds was brought back on another 1-year, $1.1 million deal, Matt Nelson was retained, Isaiah Buggs was brought back on a 2-year, $4.5 million deal, John Kaminsky was also brought back, Alex Anzalone, this one kind of surprised me a little bit, 3 years, $18.75 million. I didn't think they were going to keep him, but they ended up bringing him back, so he's going to anchor that linebacking core once again. And then they also retained Will Harris on yet another 1-year deal, and you probably noticed that's kind of a theme here with the Lions. They really do love those 1-year deals, both for their own guys and for outside free agents. They're kind of just building this thing from year to year. And then once again, CJ Moore is worth a mention, and that's a 2-year, $4.5 million deal for him. And then finally, Michael Badgley was brought back on a 1-year, $1.2 million deal. In terms of Lions free agents that they allowed to walk away, Deshaun Elliott signed 1 year with the Dolphins. Jamal Williams, unfortunately, signed 3 years with the Saints. I was hoping that he was going to be a Lion for life because I love him, but they just couldn't really come together and find something to work for them. So he's now in New Orleans, and Saints fans are going to love him. They also let Evan Brown go, Chris Board, Austin Bryant, Mike Hughes, Amani Oruwariye. And by the way, that one did surprise me a little bit because I think that Oruwariye is really talented, even though he is pretty streaky. He's now with the Giants on a 1-year deal. DJ Chark is with the Panthers, and they also let Josh Woods go to the Cardinals as well. So after looking at all these moves together, or in some cases non-moves and some of the guys they let walk, the depth chart for the Lions overall is still really, really strong, even though a lot of it is made up of 1-year contracts, and they're going to have to really nail all their draft classes to make sure they get some longer-term pieces, at least in terms of the talent that they have going into 2023. Before we even get to the draft, this is a very strong roster in my opinion. Jared Goff is playing well at quarterback. The backfield is stacked with DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, and Craig Reynolds as their number 3. Tight end, I think, is underrated for them. I'm a big fan of Brock Wright, and I think that James Mitchell last year was a pretty good sleeper kind of day 3 tight end pick for them. Derek Deese, I also was a big fan of last year. The offensive line, obviously everybody knows how stacked that is. It's arguably the best, or at minimum top 3 offensive line in the entire league. And the receiving core, even though it is thin at the top, and we're going to address that in the draft, their top 3 receivers, in my opinion, are also very, very talented. And then flipping over to the defensive side of the depth chart, considering all the moves they made in the secondary, even though it was just a bunch of one-year deals, I do think that they're more talented in the secondary right now than they were this time last year. So they've already upgraded, and I think we're going to upgrade them even more in the draft and try to make that kind of a point of emphasis, or rather a point of strength on this team. Their starting corner trio of Jeff Okudah, Emmanuel Mosley, and Cam Sutton is not bad at all, in my opinion. I'm a pretty big fan of Cam Sutton inside, obviously, and I also consider myself a Jeff Okudah truther, and I do think that he can kind of live up to his draft status eventually. You know, obviously hasn't got there yet, but I do think the talent is there. And then the safety trio, I mean, these guys are the star of the show. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Tracy Walker, and Kirby Joseph all together as that 3 safety trio. That is disgusting, and one of the best safety groups, if not the best safety group in the entire NFL. Huge fan of that. Can still add some depth at corner, or maybe even a new starter at corner, depending on how things shake out at camp, but man, that secondary is a lot better now than it was this time last year. Looking at the linebacking core, I was a big fan of Malcolm Rodriguez in last year's draft. They snagged him in the 6th round. He ended up being really productive for them. Alex Anzalone, I can kind of take it or leave it. I think he's solid, and he's being paid, appropriately for what he is in the grand scheme of things, the linebacker market. I don't think he's overpaid or underpaid. He's just kind of paid exactly as he should be, but I don't necessarily think that he is guaranteed to be their Mike linebacker of the future, especially with some of the guys that I have planned to bring in the draft. And then James Houston at Sam, even though he's really more of an edge, I guess you could technically consider him part of the linebacking core. You know, he was one of the most productive rookie pass rushers in the NFL last year, and I'm really curious to see what they do next March, because he is a free agent. You know, people don't realize that. Even though he was a rookie last year, he's already going to be a free agent next offseason. So that's another storyline to watch. And then looking at the true defensive line, if you even want to call it that, they run 5-man surfaces all the time. So, I don't know, the labels are kind of funky, but if you're just looking at the true front four, that group of John Kaminsky / Josh Paschal as like your 6 technique, Aleem McNeil as your nose, some combination of Isaiah Buggs, Levi Onwuzurike, and Benito Jones as your 3 technique, and then Aiden Hutchinson and Charles Harris as your rush ends. That to me is really, really strong at the edges, but could still use kind of an infusion of talent or an infusion of depth inside. But it's not dire to me. It's not a bad defensive line. It could be a great defensive line, and ideally in the draft, we'll get it there. So hopefully that was a good recap of everything the Lions have done up to this point and getting themselves to already being a pretty strong roster. And by the way, they still have about $24.5 million in cap space as of today, minus the $8.4 roughly that they're going to need in order to sign all their rookies. So let's say it's an even $16 million of effective cap space at the moment. And theoretically, with $16 million of effective cap space, they could do a deal for Lamar Jackson if they wanted to, and just make that first-year salary really low so they can fit it in. They have a whole bunch of cap space next year. Again, a lot of the deals they signed this year are coming off the books because they're only one-year deals. I mean, theoretically, Lamar to Detroit does make sense, and you can go watch my recent video on all of the financial implications of the type of deal that Lamar wants and all the details of how that would work, because guaranteed contracts are, let's just say, full of nuance in terms of how the bylaws are written. So if you want more information on that, go watch that video. But I'm just going to forego that option for now because I don't necessarily think Detroit is desperate enough to do that type of deal for Lamar Jackson. At least in my opinion, they shouldn't be desperate enough to do that type of deal because they already have a pretty strong team. I think they're already going to make the playoffs. And if we just save our draft assets and hit this draft out of the park, I know this sounds crazy, but they won't just be a playoff contender. They'll be a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I really do believe that. And I think that is the best possible transition that we can have to finally, at last, get to our full 7-round Lions mock draft. There might be a pretty significant chunk of Lions fans that are breathing a sigh of relief right now because a lot of them do not want to give up draft assets to go up to number 3 with Arizona and select, insert quarterback here, most likely Anthony Richardson.
there's a lot of fans that would rather just stick and pick and build a strong roster and try to make a run with Jared Goff and maybe draft a developmental guy on day 2. And I happen to agree with that line of thinking. Now, will the actual Lions front office stick and pick here, or will they go up to 3? I'd actually lean on the side of them probably going up to 3, because I think they know that they are not going to be bad enough to have this type of pick probably for a while. Like their roster and their culture and the organization itself is strong enough. They're not going to be a bad team. So this might be the only time they get to draft a quarterback. So I would not be shocked if they do that. For me personally, though, since I'm just acting as the GM and I'm doing what I think I would do if I was running that team, I would stick and pick and try to build the best possible support staff that I can for Jared Goff. That doesn't mean that I won't draft a quarterback. That just means that I won't draft one in the top 10 or give up even more assets to go up even higher in the top 10 to do that. Now, looking at this actual pick, which is Devon Witherspoon, the corner from Illinois, I think that he absolutely fits everything that the Lions want in a DB. He's tough, he's aggressive, he tackles. I think that he could be a Pro Bowl corner out the box, but I also think he could be an all-pro safety just because of how damn good he is at tackling in space. In terms of overall DB prospects, he is the best one in this class. You could argue as a pure cover corner that Christian Gonzalez is better, but in terms of who I have the most faith in, that if I have to put him outside and press, he can do that. If he needs to play off, he can do that. If I want to put him in the nickel spot, let's say Cam Sutton gets hurt, and we need another guy right now that can play inside in the slot, and he's not going to get absolutely abused in the run game, I think Witherspoon can do that and do it extraordinarily well. He is versatile, he is exceptionally talented, he is tough, he just plays like a Lion, and I think that Lions fans would be obsessed with him from day one. I know that there will be a lot of pushback on this pick because people are looking at, Jalen Carter if he falls, and there is a need at kind of interior defensive line, and people would be lining up out the door to get Jalen Carter. I understand that, but in terms of organizational fit plus talent, I really can't picture a better fit here than Witherspoon to Detroit. He just feels like a Lion to me, and I wouldn't sleep right at night if I didn't make this pick. So, Devon Witherspoon, you are a Detroit Lion. And with that, let's get to our second pick in the first round, the actual native Lions pick, and that is going to be all the way down at 18th overall. Surprisingly, there's not that many great fits that I can find scheme-wise for Kalijah Kancey in the back half of the first round, but Detroit is absolutely one of them. The main concern for Kancey, obviously, is, can somebody at his size profile hold up against the run as a full-time 3 technique? And that part, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not so sure about. I do have my doubts there, but in terms of just bringing him in on third down as a rookie and saying, go kill quarterbacks, he's going to do that better than any other interior rusher in this class, not named Jalen Carter. He is exceptionally quick and explosive, and I know he gets the Aaron Donald comp because he's an undersized DT from Pitt. He's not Donald, he doesn't have quite that power, but he does have the quickness and the fluidity, which is still really, really special. Heavy-footed guards, especially the ones that are like 315, 320 or more, they're just really, really struggling to keep up with him because he's so quick. They can't move fast enough. And if you put him against a tackle, that's really the only time that you kind of see his power show up because he does get low and he brings all 280 plus pounds of his frame into their chest. So I think he's a little too quick for guards, and sometimes he can be a little bit too powerful for like the skinnier, lighter tackles that you see nowadays. And it makes him a really, really tough matchup on third down. Plus, all that athleticism really shows up on stunts as well. He kind of gets to those landmarks a lot quicker than most interior guys. And so guards that aren't used to having to peel off that quickly to pick things up, they're just kind of a half a step late and he's already through and, quarterback's on the ground. So I think his particular athleticism / size profile makes him a really, really, really deadly pass rusher, which in itself is worth a first round pick. And then as a run defender, he honestly doesn't have to play that much on early downs because I think they do have some kind of big war daddies in that rotation where he doesn't have to play 3 technique on first and second down. He doesn't have to play 2-eye. He doesn't have to play 4-eye or 5 technique. They have enough size there in the rotation that he can just kind of be a third down specialist as a rookie. And then as he kind of, ages and fills out and, maybe puts on a little bit of weight in the NFL, we can see how he does as a full-time 3 technique later. But for now, he's a great pass rusher. The Lions need interior pass rush help. And for me, this is one of the best fits I could find for any team for Kalijah Kancey in the first round. Now, moving to the second round, I kind of alluded to this pick a little bit earlier when I talked about Alex Anzalone. I don't necessarily think he's a bad linebacker, but I don't think he's a great one either. And I think that pick 48 is a perfect opportunity to hopefully get a great linebacker. I would be kind of surprised if Jack Campbell is there at the 48th overall pick, but if he is, the Lions absolutely need to run this card in. I think that he is one of the most talented inside linebacker prospects that we have seen in quite some time, and I think that's backed up by his RAS score, which is something that Kentley Platt puts together, measures relative athleticism compared to prospects like in a historical context. And looking at his total size, speed, fluidity profile, he's 6'4.5", 249, 37.5-inch vert, which is outrageous, 10.8 in the broad, 4.65 in the 40, which I know seems average nowadays, but historically speaking, that's still pretty damn good. A 1.59 10-yard split, an outrageous shuttle of 4.24 and a 3-cone of 6.74 at somebody of his size. Like, he is so not normal. Athletically speaking, he compares to like a Brian Urlacher type of athlete, which I know is extremely high praise, but he absolutely could be that type of linebacker. That is how talented he is. And oh, by the way, not only is he big and strong and fast and all that stuff, but he's really instinctive and like very technically refined as well. This might not fit best in a mock draft episode, but I'm going to go in the weeds a little bit here, so please indulge me. A lot of young linebackers his age, if you look at them pre-snap in their stance, they don't necessarily have the most efficient stance for getting a good first step and, not getting washed out of a play because they're a step behind or they just don't have a good first step or they're false stepping. If you look at a lot of like seasoned veteran linebackers in their stance, and Jack Campbell does this too, they have what are called positive shin angles, which, trust me, is absolutely a real coaching term. It's a real thing. And what positive shin angles mean is that when you're standing there with your knees bent, your knees are inside the vertical plane of your foot. So think of it like how the base of a vase is wider than the top, right? You're doing that so that you are balanced in your stance and you don't have to false step to kind of generate force on your first step. You're already locked and loaded and balanced so that when you take that first step, you are out of there. You are gone. And I think that efficiency of movement in his first step combined with his athleticism, that's a big reason why he's always getting to the right place at the right time. Like, he just looks and acts like a veteran linebacker, even down to his pre-snap stance. He's just very well coached. And I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of young linebackers, they don't line up like that. Like, they're not as disciplined to have the same efficient pre-snap stance every single play. It shows up with Jack Campbell. He's a freak athlete. He's highly technically refined. He's very instinctive. And if he's there at pick 48, I think he's a no-brainer. I know they brought back Anzalone. I kind of don't care. I think Campbell's going to be better, and I think he's going to be a much higher ceiling long-term solution at Mike linebacker for them. Hopefully all of that made sense. If you need any sort of clarification on very mundane and obscure linebacker technical nuances, feel free to leave comments down below. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. But for now, let's get to our second round pick, which is only going to be 7 selections later in the second round at pick 55 overall. Every single time I talk about A.T. Perry, I feel like I'm just kind of nudging him further and further up on my board. And I really do think that he's kind of one of the most underappreciated players at any position in this entire draft class. He has size, he has speed, he has fluidity, he has ball skills, he has technical nuance as a route runner. And most of the receivers, at least the top-end receivers in this class, are not very big. So if you're looking for a bigger outside receiver that could potentially play X or Z for you, which the Lions are, they already have their slot taken care of, they already have their deep threat taken care of, they kind of are in need of a true X receiver like A.T. Perry. I think Perry's the guy in this class for you, and he's probably not getting out of the second round at this point. So if you're going to do it, 55 is the pick to do it. If you want more context for why I like him so much and also why the Lions probably like him so much, I'm going to throw in this clip that we had from our full interview over on the podcast channel with him, the Bootleg Football Podcast. And I want you to watch the next couple minutes of this, and then after this, you can go watch the full interview. But just the way he talks about football, he sounds like a 10-year veteran. And if he approached his interview with the Lions like he approached the interview with us, I guarantee you they fell in love with him. When you guys are, say, throwing a go ball down the sideline, right? And sometimes that can be something that develops late because you get a cloud corner and you convert it or something like that, right? Do you throw those based on leverage, or do you have landmarks and they say get there?
Based on leverage, honestly.
Okay.
So like, for instance, like when I'm watching DBs, like I look at leverage. So like if they're playing outside, head up, or inside, and then I'll break it down. If they when they play off coverage, do they have good hips? Can they turn their hips? And can they get out of their breaks faster than me?
Usually no.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I'll watch the safeties too, because sometimes they'll give the coverage away.
Yeah.
And then like from then on, I'll talk to Sam and be like, all right, this is what he's playing in the game. This is how the corner is playing me. So if I run it this way, are you gonna throw it? Like, am I getting there too fast, too early, too late, too slow? So it's like, it's just honestly just breaking it down and then talking with the QB and then making sure that we're on the same page. Like if I'm gonna be here at this time, make sure the ball will be there at that time.
So if you're on the numbers and he's head up, you pretty much know what's going back shoulder because he's playing top down.
Yeah. Or if I'm like, I know me, like I've always worked on my first step, like out of that release.
Yeah.
So just making sure that, like for instance, I'm gonna break it down. So when I'm gonna release, Please do. So when he's head up, this is DB's head up, and I'm shaking and I'm getting by. I'm gonna make sure that this leg goes first.
Okay.
Because I want to be able to dip that shoulder so he doesn't get hands on. And then when I take that another step, then that extra step, that left step, is to propel me with this next step to get in front of him and stack on top.
Right.
So, and if, God forbid, that the DB gets in front of me, then I'll be ready for that, and I'll be able to adjust, and then I'll be ready for the back shoulder.
Once again, if you want to watch that full interview, it's over on our podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. You can go check that out after you're done here. He really is a wonderful player, a great human, and somebody who I think that really, regardless of where he ends up in the draft, his fans and his teammates are going to love him. From here, we're going to go to our third round pick 81 overall, and finally, we're going to address the quarterback position. I'm going to make a very similar argument to the one that I made in the Seahawks episode because I do think that Seattle and Detroit are in very similar situations where they have veteran quarterbacks who played really well last year, and I'm not super excited to move off of them right now because of how well they played, but I also think that we do need a very talented answer for the future for as those guys get older or expensive or whatever argument you want to make. You know, obviously Geno's not going to start forever in Seattle. Goff is not going to start forever in Detroit. So we do need to have an option. And for both of these teams, but especially Detroit, I think that option is going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. In terms of talent, he is the most talented quarterback in this class, not named Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. And to be perfectly honest, he's not far off those guys. He has a howitzer for an arm, so he can make any throw from any level of the field, you know, far hash or not. He was making far hash throws in college, which is even harder than in the NFL because the hashes are wider in college. So he has legitimate, like, full field ability as a passer. He also has mid 4.5 speed, so even though he's not playing ahead of Jared Goff as a rookie, if you want to get him on the field just so that you can run some kind of funky run concepts, you know, you want to run QB counter bash, he can do that. You want to integrate some zone read stuff in there that Goff can't do, DTR can do it. In addition to, oh, by the way, he can throw the ball too. So it's not like it's a one-dimensional, oh, DTR's in the field, they're running the ball. No, they would just have to account for more stuff. And I think that over time, you know, he would be an option that has a lot of developmental ceiling still to go. I'm not saying he's a perfect prospect. You know, sometimes the accuracy can be a bit shaky. Sometimes the decision making can be a bit shaky. But I do not think for a moment that he is as developmental of a prospect as some people are insinuating. I think he's a lot further along than people give him credit for. And to be honest, if he had to start a couple games as a rookie, you know, if Jared Goff, knock on wood, gets hurt, he could do it. Like, I'm not worried about it. He could play as a rookie and be fine. There would be some mistakes, but I don't think it would be a disaster. When I look at DTR, I see somebody who over the last, 3 or 4 years has gotten better every single year. It reminds me a lot of Jalen Hurts when he was coming out of OU/Alabama, where, early in his career, yeah, it was kind of rough, but as the seasons went on in college, he developed and he just got better every single year. He never got worse. He never plateaued. He only got better. And I think that that development curve could continue in the NFL, especially with a very good Lions coaching staff and a great offensive line and a great core of weapons. I think that DTR legitimately could be a Jalen Hurts type of story for the Lions. And just like Jalen Hurts, he's not going to play as a rookie. He could, but he won't. But I think, year 2, year 3, if he gets on the field, he could do some pretty special things because he is remarkably talented. So kind of looking, top down at the total quarterback debate, should they trade up for Richardson? Should they take Levis at 6? If none of these guys are playing anyway, I would rather just take the almost equally talented DTR on day 2, since he's also not going to play, and then preserve my 6th and 18th overall pick and also my day 2 picks. Preserve those to get other good players at positions of need and still get a very talented quarterback at pick 81 overall. To me, if I was not even just rebuilding, but just reloading the Lions, that's what I would do. And ultimately, I think it's a pretty good path. So again, let me know your thoughts, because I know Lions Nation is very, very split on this issue. I just kind of wanted to present my side of it. But from here, we're going to skip round 4 because we don't have a 4th round pick. And we're going to go all the way down to round 5, pick 154 overall. I know that this pick might seem a little off the wall because the Lions' edge rush rotation is probably the strongest unit on the team right now. Like, they're like 2 or 3 deep on both sides. At Sam linebacker, rush end, even at their base end position, like their backup is Zach Pascal right now, who I had as a first round talent last year. They're not hurting for edge players. However, if you look at all of their pending free agents in 2024, things could thin out pretty quickly. Charles Harris only has 1 year left on his deal. Romeo Okwara has 1 year left. Julian Okwara, Demetrius Taylor, James Houston, like I mentioned earlier. All of those guys are going to be free agents this time next year. And even though they might bring back 1, maybe 2, they're not going to bring back all of them. So I think that the edge rotation for the Lions could go from their strength to their weakness pretty damn quickly. They are going to thin out. That is almost guaranteed. So looking at Jose Ramirez as a prospect, I think he is an absolute perfect fit for kind of, that waiting in the wings 2024 pass rusher option that can play either as a Sam linebacker behind James Houston or on the weak side behind Aiden Hutchinson and kind of competing for the backup role over there too. He can play from a 4, a 3, or a 2-point stance. It does not affect him whatsoever. He has every pass rush move in his arsenal. And he's a good, though not great athlete, which is why, he's going day 3, in addition to him not being the youngest guy. But just in terms of quote unquote day 3 pass rushers, he's probably the best one in this class. Like, I think, top of 4th round is where we can start to expect his name to come off the board. He's going to be one of the very best pass rushers drafted on Saturday. And if he gets to the 150s, I think that he is a prime target for the Lions. I'm not saying he will get there, because again, I'm very high on him, and I think that a lot of NFL teams will be high on him too. But if he does, he is a perfect fit. Plus, when he did lead the FBS in sacks last year at 12.5, he did so at Eastern Michigan. So a lot of Lions fans are probably already pretty familiar with him. And I think that he's already ingratiated himself to that fan base enough as it is. So, let's keep the really good pass rushers in the state of Michigan. In a normal draft class, he would not be here at 154, but in a loaded edge class like this one, it's very possible that he slips. So I just really wanted to talk about Jose Ramirez. He's one of my favorite day 3 guys in this class, and hopefully the Lions get to keep him within their own borders. Now, moving down to the 6th round, pick 183, let's talk about underappreciated DBs, because even though the Lions have already filled out their secondary, both in free agency and even in this mock draft, we're still not done yet, and I think that there's one more really talented name they could add. just like edge, I fully understand Lions fans, scoffing at taking another safety because they don't technically need one, at least not for 2023. It's a very, very strong unit, one of the strongest safety units in the NFL. And yet at the same time, just like edge, which is also another strong unit here, it could pretty dramatically thin out going into 2024. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr. obviously is only on a one-year mercenary contract, so he's probably gone in 2024. Will Harris as well only has 1 year left. And Tracy Walker only has 2 years left, and he's going to be 30 pretty soon here as well. So I do think that there's room for yet another safety, somebody who might factor into their plans down the line. And at least personally for me, Quindell Johnson is one of the higher upside, quote unquote, day 3 DBs in this class. I happen to be a sucker for safeties that also have nickel versatility. So if they sustain some injuries at the nickel spot, he's somebody who I could potentially plug in there and feel pretty good about it. He's really explosive in short areas. And his range on the back end, even though it's not great, I think it's pretty solid. He's a mid 4.5, low 4.5 type of guy, which as a safety, I think is perfectly fine. For me, the skill set that matters most is, can you handle receivers with a two-way go in space, which most modern safeties these days kind of have to play as if they're a nickel corner, but 12 yards off the ball, if that makes sense, because so much quarters is being played these days, so much match zone, all that type of stuff where, you're carrying the number 2 vertical down the field and you're by yourself and you have a whole bunch of space around you. You have to play a two-way go. You don't know if they're breaking inside or outside. So you're just playing nickel corner, but with a hell of a lot more runway for the receiver. And it's a really, really hard thing to do. So seeing a safety that has nickel experience, that has man coverage experience, that to me is a premium skill set for modern defenses, and long gone are the days where you're looking for like Earl Thomas at post safety and Cam Chancellor at strong safety. No, defenses don't play that way anymore, and they don't play that way anymore for a reason. You need versatile safeties on the back end that can play man coverage. I think Quindell Johnson is one of those, and for that reason, he is one of the more undervalued safeties in this entire class to me. So hopefully that argument was compelling enough. I know Lions fans might have their pitchforks out for me taking all these positions that they are already pretty stacked at, but believe me, in the NFL, you can go from stacked to absolutely not stacked in a pretty short period of time. And with that, let's get to our final pick of this mock draft, staying in the 6th round, all the way down at pick 194. We did already address interior defensive line earlier in this mock by taking Kalijah Kancey in the 1st round, but I think that taking Moro Ojomo in the 6th round is the perfect complementary pick to Kancey. I did express some concerns about Kancey's run defense potential and if he could hold up against double teams at 3 technique and, be able to not get blown off the ball. And I still think that's valid, but Ojomo 100% would not get blown off the ball. If there is one thing that he can do really well, it is absolutely obliterate the run game. That is what I'm bringing him in for. It's so that on early downs, if we needed him to play 2-eye or 3 or 4-eye or 5, maybe even compete with Josh Paschal for snaps at 6 technique, he can play any of those spots and just completely ruin run games, get teams into, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 6, and then we roll Kancey in to rush the passer on 3rd down. I kind of foresee them as working in a tandem together. So even though we're not getting a, complete 3-down player out of one of them, we're getting 3-down utility out of both of them as a duo. When it comes to Ojomo as a pass rusher, maybe we get caught in no huddle and he's on the field as a pass rusher. I do think he's a little bit limited there, which is why I have him as a 6th round pick. He has tools, but I don't necessarily think he plays to those tools as a pass rusher. He's kind of a straight line guy right now. Pretty over-reliant on power and length for me, but not necessarily as overwhelming as some of the other power rushers in this class. I just think he has a lot of development still to do so that he can utilize the tools that he does have. Doesn't mean that he won't get there eventually, but he's just nowhere near there right now. But again, as a run defender, it's pretty hard to find very many run defenders in this class that are better than him. So to me, this pick is about having somebody that can play as a rookie on early downs, and we feel pretty good about it. And then maybe, as his career goes on, we develop the pass rush part and try to turn him into a 3-down player. It's literally the same thing as Kalijah Kancey, just in reverse. So that'll round off this mock draft, and kind of looking at the mock as a whole. Again, Devon Witherspoon and Kalijah Kancey in the first round, Jack Campbell and A.T. Perry in the second round, DTR in the third round as our future quarterback option, Jose Ramirez in the fifth round, Quindell Johnson in the sixth round, and then finally Moro Ojomo also in the sixth round. Looking at this mock draft combined with what the Lions have already done in free agency, this to me is a Super Bowl caliber roster. And the fact that we are able to get to Super Bowl caliber roster in one draft, that to me speaks to why I'm not super eager to give up assets to move up for a quarterback. After this mock draft, there are basically no holes in Detroit at all. They are deep, they are talented, they have a great coaching staff, and they have a quarterback who's already been to a Super Bowl as it is. I do think that Jared Goff gets kind of unfairly shat on, and I know that he's not the best quarterback, but he's good. He's good enough to get the Lions to where they want to go, which is a Super Bowl if he has this type of team around him. He's done it before, he can do it again, and to be honest, he's a better player now than he was the last time he went on a championship run. So I really do think the Lions have something here. I think they should put the pedal to the metal and absolutely nail this draft. Fill their holes, go on a run, try to get a ring. It doesn't mean that you can't address quarterback. It just means that you don't need to address it in the top 10. You can have your cake and eat it too. You just have to do it the right way.
All right, that'll do it for today. If you're a Lions fan and you have any sort of opinion about what I did here in order to try to get this team over the hump, I would love to hear your perspective on it, because this is an organization that can kind of go in any direction. Also, if you're interested in any of the rookies that I talked about, especially skill position rookies, and you kind of want to get on that train early in terms of fantasy football and trying to, get ahead of everybody who maybe hasn't dug into this rookie class yet, and you want to make money while doing it, of course, Underdog Fantasy, which provided this lovely set for us today. You can draft in Best Ball and Underdog literally right now. They started Best Ball before the Super Bowl even happened. So all these rookies that don't even have a team yet, if you really believe in one, whether it's Zay Flowers, Xavier Hutchinson, Bijan, Dalton Kincaid, the Utah tight end, if you have any sort of inkling that one of these guys is going to be a megastar, now is the time to go draft them, because most football fans have no idea who they are, quite frankly. And so you're going to get great value. You're going to be able to take, a 1,000-yard running back in the last round because you know who they are. And most fans don't. So if you want to capitalize on that, you can start drafting right now on Underdog Fantasy. Don't wait till August. Do it now, because that's when you're going to get value. Once again, thank you to Underdog for sponsoring today's show and providing the sets, and in general, just being an awesome company. I truly consider all of them my friends. They are run by a wonderful group of people that I could not possibly imagine anybody else doing as good of a job as they do. It's a really, really, really good company. So again, thank you to Underdog for making all this happen. And I'll be back soon. I'm recording a lot of these in one day and housing half a bottle of tequila, more than half a bottle of tequila. Let's not lie, Brett. Come on now. I still got the Eagles and Falcons episodes to do. It's a long one today, guys. It's a long one today. All right. I'll see you guys later. I'm going to go eat some bread.